Hi, I'm Susanna and it's time for my belated December reading wrap-up. Let's start with Lauren Groff's historical fiction, The Vaster Wilds. Virginia, 1600s. In the last days of winter, a servant girl escapes from a famished and disease-ridden colonial settlement of Jamestown into wilderness. Carrying only her wits and a few possessions, she attempts to travel north to the safety of another colony. But in the vast wilderness around her, threats loom behind every tree. Hostile men, hungry animals, and the forest itself. This was an amazing read. The writing is lyrical and poetic, and the mostly nameless main character is a strong and determined female lead. It took me some time to orient myself to the narrative, and I was especially confused about the main character's age. She was called a girl throughout the novel, and it wasn't until toward the latter half of the novel when it was revealed that she was at least 16 years old, possibly 17 or 18. At first I had expected her to be a couple of years younger, but it makes sense that she was called a girl considering her status as a servant. Throughout the book we learn her backstory as a servant and a companion to her mistress's disabled daughter, as well as her short-lived love affair with a Dutch sailor during the voyage across the Atlantic and her experiences in the colony. Her life has been a series of hardships and her escape doesn't make her life easier. The book is full of visceral and at times disturbing descriptions of starvation, sexual abuse and human cruelty. That makes The Vaster Wilds a dark and depressing read. I wouldn't recommend it if you're not a fan of dystopian-esque literature, or if you're squeamish about descriptions of excrement and eating practically anything edible. I also wouldn't recommend this book if you want more plot and action. The main storyline of the girl's escape and running away didn't have much development and was a little repetitive. But if you love historical fiction with lyrical prose, definitely read this book. I gave it full 5 stars. The second book I finished was Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is a dystopian fiction. Teenager Lauren Olamina lives with her family in one of the few safe neighborhoods on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Outside the walls of their defended enclave, chaos reigns and only the rich and powerful are safe. When their compound is destroyed in a fire and her family is killed, Lauren is forced out into the dangerous world with a handful of other refugees. Parable of the Sower is Octavia E. Butler's dystopian fiction set in the years 2024 to 2027. The American society has nearly collapsed due to climate change. There's water shortages, inflation, unemployment and housing crisis, and dangerous drugs. The newly elected President Donner promises to make United States strong again, but might just set the country back 100 years. Sound familiar? A lot of people have been reading Octavia E. Butler's book in recent years, and no wonder. First published in 1993, this book is more timely now than at the time of its publication. Butler's predictions about the future are eerily accurate. The story is told in a diary format with Lauren recording everything she sees and experiences. Like in Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies I read earlier last year, the format means that the narration happens after the fact. The reader is kept at a distance from what little action the story has, which makes the stakes rather low. In addition, Parable of the Sower is a very introspective read. Lauren mostly writes about her ideas for a new religion she calls Earthseed and her belief in God as change. This gives the book a very slow pace. If this was a more recent young adult dystopian, the main character would naturally lead a rebellion against the corrupted government. But as this book is for adults, Lauren, like any normal teenager, cannot do much. Therefore, not much happens in the first half of the book. The story first feels like it's starting around page 50. That's when Lauren first voices out her desire to leave the safety of the community and look for a better life elsewhere. But she doesn't actually leave until the catastrophe that destroys her community at the midpoint. I found the latter half of the book, where Lauren and other refugees seek out a better future, more interesting than the first half. However, the problem is that during the latter half of the book we meet a completely new cast of characters that we never really get to know very well. This is another drawback of the story being told only from Lauren's perspective. Parable of the Sower is perfect for readers who enjoy slower-paced dystopian fiction with philosophical and theological musings. But I would recommend this book for everyone just for how accurately it predicted the future. The accuracy of the predictions could have given this book 5 stars, but I found the philosophical musings quite boring and repetitive. Toward the end of the book, there was also an unnecessary romance between 18-year-old Lauren and a man older than her father. I found the age gap rather gross. Because of these reasons, I'm deducting half a star and I'm giving this book 4.5 stars in total. The next book I read is another dystopian fiction, I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. In an underground bunker, 39 women and a young girl are imprisoned in a cage, their every move watched over by guards. As the girl cannot remember life before the imprisonment, the women treat her as an outcast. Until one day, a siren goes off, the guards run away, and a stroke of luck gives the women a chance to escape. In the strange and desolate world above, the girl shows herself to be the key to the others' survival. I Who Have Never Known Men is Jacqueline Harpman's dystopian fiction set in a post-apocalyptic world and an instant 5-star read for me. Originally published in French in 1995, this book has found new success in recent years and its popularity does not surprise me. This was a gripping and thought-provoking novel. With less than 200 pages, I Who Have Never Known Men is a fast read, but it is introspective rather than action-packed story. The plot of the novel is simple. The main character and the women she's been imprisoned with have lived in an underground bunker for years. The only excitement offered to them is a daily discussion on how to boil their meager rations of meat and vegetables. When they finally escape the prison, they encounter a strange planet that may not be Earth. A world with nothing but plains and hills and occasional rivers, unchanging seasons, and bunker after bunker with dead prisoners, both women and men. The nameless main character doesn't remember anything about the life before, the life the women consider as normal with menial jobs, husbands, and children. This makes her an outcast, but also gives her an advantage. Since she has not experienced any other way of living, she can adapt to the new reality more easily than the women with their vague memories of the life before imprisonment. It's impossible to read this book without noting the author's background as a Jewish woman who escaped the Nazi occupation of Belgium during the Second World War. The senseless imprisonment and human cruelty remind one of the concentration camps and the Holocaust. Even after the women escape, they continue to be prisoners in this strange world. They are forced to utilize the commodities and food offered in the other bunkers. What is the surreal world they live in? Who imprisoned them and why? If you want a novel that answers all of the questions it raises, this book will frustrate you. Personally, I found that a good thing. Sometimes you need novels that only give you questions and no answers. I Who Have Never Known Men is a puzzle that refuses to be solved, leaving you with a long-lasting impression. This short but impactful novel deserves 5 stars, if not more. During Christmas, I also read 2 books from my mother's bookshelves. The first was a historical fiction, The Beekeeper's Promise by Fiona Valpy. The story is told in a dual timeline. The historical storyline is set in France during the Second World War. It follows Eliane Martin, a young beekeeper who makes the dangerous decision to join the resistance. The second timeline is set in modern-day rural France. It follows Abby House, a young British woman trying to start her life again after an abusive marriage. I read Kristin Hanna's The Nightingale a year ago, and as both books are about women in French resistance, it was impossible not to compare them. Valpy's novel feels lighter and more hopeful, but it lacks the emotional depth of The Nightingale. I also didn't particularly care for the modern storyline. It detracted from the historical narrative and felt rather contrived. I would have enjoyed the book a lot more if it had been purely historical fiction without a modern storyline. The historical storyline would have also deserved more substance and depth. Nevertheless, it's a charming book and worth a read if you enjoy books set during the Second World War. The second book I read during Christmas was Educated, which is Tara Westover's memoir of her life with a survivalist Mormon family. Her father believed that the government was out to get them and the family prepared for the end of the world. Homeschooled, Tara didn't set foot in a classroom until the age of 17, when she was admitted to Brigham Young University. There, she learned for the first time about important world events like the Holocaust and the Civil Rights Movement. Memoirs are hard to read, but this was a clear 5-star read. Educated is about the transformative power of education. It is also a tale of the grief that comes with severing the family ties. With its depictions of abuse and gaslighting, it's by no means an easy read, but definitely a book I'd recommend. In December, I also read a few other non-fiction books. One of them was my old high school biology textbook, and 2 others were about the ancient Greek novels. I read Graham Anderson's Ancient Fiction, the novel in the Greco-Roman world, and Helen Morales' Vision and Narrative in Achilles Statius' Leucippe and Clitophon. In January, my goal is to finish one novel, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I also want to start Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I also want to read 2 non-fiction books. These are 2 more of my old high school biology textbooks. Those were all of the books I read in December and my goals for January. Let me know in the comments what your favorite read in December was, and I'll see you in my next video.